Hi, I'm Jamie, your host for the Not Going to Uni podcast, where we talk all things emerging talent and alternative routes to university. In today's episode, we speak to Ethan, a digital marketing apprentice from Accolade Wines. Hi Ethan, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you doing?
Yeah, great stuff. Great to have you on. Do you want to just give our audience a brief introduction to yourself?
Of course. My name's Ethan. I am a level 6 digital marketing apprentice at Accolade Wines, doing the social media and e-commerce for some of the UK's biggest wine brands. And I'm also a Not Going to Uni ambassador.
Ethan, if we start off just with a brief introduction to kind of your journey today and how you've got there, and just to give our audience a little bit of an insight as to how you've got to where you are today and how it's going, really.
Yeah, of course. So my journey's been kind of quite different because I've jumped around with what I wanted to do quite a lot. So I started off wanting to be a chef when I was younger, probably from the age of like 6 or 7, and kept that up until I was about 15 or 16, I think. I planned all my GCSEs around it, moving to Spain and setting up a restaurant. But I got to the end of my food tech exam and I was properly stressed by it and didn't enjoy it. So decided that when I was going into my A levels, I wanted maybe to do something more kind of corporate-y or more business focused. So changed my A levels and did business, psychology, and drama. I've always kind of been interested in theatre, so at this point I was thinking about opportunities perhaps in kind of maybe running a theatre or producing shows or something more behind the scenes. And then I decided that maybe that wasn't for me either, because I was looking at the kind of prep you needed to get there and the journey, and it was a bit too long for me because I'm kind of the person that doesn't like to stick around for too long. I like to have a bit of change in my career and constantly develop and progress. So then it was kind of also around this time that I decided that I didn't want to go to university. I'm not really that much of a partier, so like the idea of that kind of party atmosphere around uni didn't excite me. And I've also never really been great in a classroom, so lectures and webinars and all of that didn't really excite me that much. So that's when I decided I wanted to do an apprenticeship, and I knew I kind of wanted to do digital marketing through the course, my business A level, where I'd learned about it there. And then I was on holiday. It was about this time last year, I think. And I was on a wine tasting with my dad, and the apprenticeship at Accolade Wines came up, and I applied for it. About 2 weeks later, I went for an interview, and then the next day I had a call from the HR team telling me I'd got the job. And then I started last September. So I'm 8 months in, I think, now. And yeah, really enjoying it, getting to work on lots of cool campaigns with lots of cool people, getting to travel, go to events. Yeah, no, it's been good.
Amazing. And you mentioned there you kind of used to struggle with the classroom aspect of school. I mean, to dive into that in terms of your level 6 apprenticeship, and obviously I'm assuming you kind of have 20% or a day off per week to do that. How do you manage that now you're in a full-time job?
I think at the beginning, I really struggled with motivating myself. I got really excited by the fact that I was working, my first proper job, and I really struggled to find the motivation. But now, I think what I find better now is I have something to link it to. I hated being stuck in a classroom and like learning maths and thinking, when the hell am I going to use Pythagoras' theorem in real life? Like I couldn't get my head around it. Whereas now I'm learning things and being able to relate it to my role, or vice versa, learning things to my role and being able to bring them into my uni assignments. So I think I find it easier now with the fact that there's a link between my role and what I'm learning. And the reason why I think that's different to me going to university is the fact that if I was learning at university, it would all be theory for me for the next 3 years. And then I'd have to relate it in 3 years' time. Once I leave university, I have my degree. Whereas now it just goes in a bit easier because it's linked to something I'm doing there and then. And my company are really good as well at linking what I'm working on to what I'm currently learning. So I come out of a lecture and they say, how did that go? And I'll be like, yeah, no, it was cool. We were learning about, designing landing pages, for example. And they say, oh, we've got a cool task with the Australian team. I'll put you in touch. And then I start to work on that task with them. So I'm constantly working on something and learning something similar at the same time.
Yeah, that's mega helpful. I hear it so much from other apprentices and ambassadors that are obviously doing their study on the side, and it's like they go back into the full-time job and it's like, well, there's nothing specific here to relate this to, and ultimately until you're either tested on that or you've got coursework to do or whatever, you're not applying it to the real world, which I think is important throughout an apprenticeship to continue to do, isn't it?
100%.
So marketing then, it's a broad subject, there's so many different areas. How are you finding marketing? Are there any specific areas that you're liking so far, or is there any that you kind of want to focus on moving forward?
I think for me at the moment, I'm just kind of exploring my options within digital. And what's so fun about that is the fact that it's always evolving. So just before I jumped on this recording, we had a call with our brand and digital team about the new Instagram Threads app and about what we can do with that. And it was like a whole new avenue for us and something which we were able to develop. But, a week ago, we weren't even thinking of that. And we're already developing a strategy like a week later. It's so fast moving. So I think at the moment, I'm just exploring my options, around areas of digital, whether it be like social media or e-commerce or like the photo shoot side of it or the strategy side of it. I'm not really sure which direction I want to go yet. But I think that's what's great about the apprenticeship, is that it gives me that option. I think if I were to jump into a role without my apprenticeship, I would have been in one of those areas. I would have been in the strategy team, or I would have been in the CRM team or whatever, and would have been stuck there until there was an opportunity for movement. Whereas now I'm able to kind of spread myself thin. I've done lots of different projects all the time and find where I best fit.
Yeah, you're able to dip your toes in lots of different waters at once. And ultimately, when you finish your apprenticeship, you may or may not know by then. You may want to continue exploring a few different options, but you may have a better insight as to which one you kind of want to streamline later down the line. So digital marketing apprentice in terms of what you do day to day, do you want to talk to our audience a little bit about what that covers? Is it different day to day? Do you have kind of a strict structure with anything?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to sound really cliche and sit here and say that, every day's different, because it's not. There are things that I have to do kind of on a regular basis. But typically we have things such as our always on campaigns, which we run for, I think at the moment it's 10 brands. I'm in charge of getting the assets from the brand team, setting them up as meta campaigns, assigning budget, making sure that we're keeping on top of trends and stuff like that. So typically I'll spend like my Monday morning setting up the campaigns for the week. And then I'll spend the afternoon just kind of trawling through socials, looking for trends, looking to see whether we can link any of our brands to that we can jump off, to see whether we can get any kind of viral clips out of it. And then throughout the rest of the week, it kind of changes. I'm working on a big project right now where I'm doing a lot of Photoshop, which wasn't something that I'd done for kind of the first 6 months of my apprenticeship. So that's kind of quite nice to work on at the moment. I work very closely with our Meta account manager to kind of work out any problems and work out the solutions to them. The same with Pinterest. So basically, it's just a lot of problem solving at the moment, but also trying to improve how we show up online as best as possible. So finding all of those tiny details that we have to fix. So whether it be trawling through our e-commerce pages on the big four retailers, the Sainsbury's, the Tesco, the Asda, the Morrisons, trying to see if we can tweak anything to make our pages that little bit better, to elevate us above our competition. And the other one I'm working on at the moment is trying to get us set up on Amazon as an Amazon vendor. So developing our Amazon store to try and make us look as professional as possible on there at the moment as well. So yeah, I've got my fingers in lots of different pies at the moment. But if you were to ask me 6 weeks ago, that would have been completely different. And if you ask me in 6 weeks' time again, it'll be completely different. So
amazing. So I guess moving on to something I wanted to talk to you about in terms of making first impressions, and obviously you've evidently provided some a significant amount of value as an apprentice so far at your organisation. What kind of advice would you give to our audience listening around making that first impression, and ultimately, whether that's at interview stage trying to get into the apprenticeship, but also when you're in that role, how do you make sure you're continuing to get opportunities like such as yourself?
I think starting at the interview stage, there's nothing better than being authentic. You know, sometimes you are just not right for the role. There is no point forcing yourself into a role which you're not a good fit for. There's no point sitting here and, you know, analyzing everybody in the room, seeing kind of what their common trait is, and then forcing that trait upon yourself, because at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to keep that up for 3, 4, 5 years. But also, I think for me, and having spoken to my manager about this, the thing that he said made the biggest impression on him was the fact that I was aware of my own weaknesses, and that, you know, for some of them I had plans of action for of how to work around them, but also others, like, you know, I was saying, look, this is one of my biggest weaknesses. I want to get around it. I'm not sure how. You know, if you give me this role, I'm sure we can work together to figure that out. But I think also you want to provide the most amount of value you can to a company. I think one of my biggest things at the beginning was not saying no to anything, within reason. I didn't want to overload myself with work, but equally I didn't want to turn down any opportunity that might be there for development. So, you know, even things as such as we did an event in September, in which we had all of our customers come into a big event and we sold our products to them, and it was like a big kind of almost quite a theatrical event. And even there, you know, I was doing the kind of menial tasks, emptying the it sounds really disgusting, but emptying like the spit buckets where you spit your wine out when you're testing, or like sweeping.
That's one to put on the CV.
Or whether it was like handing out the food while we were there, or replenishing samples. You know, I was doing all those menial tasks, but also I was getting roped into those high-level conversations with buyers at all of the retailers kind of worldwide. So for me, those two biggest ones are like, be aware of your weaknesses, but also your strengths. And also within reason, don't say no to anything at the beginning until you know where you sit. Because you want to prove to your team that you're there for them. You want to prove that you're a safe pair of hands. So yeah, and I'd say also never be afraid to ask questions, because if they ask you to do something, you're like, yeah, I don't actually know how to do that yet. They would much rather teach you how to do it so you can help them in the future than go to someone else. 100%. So ask those questions, get the development, and progress your career and your understanding.
Amazing. So why a degree apprenticeship then? Why did you kind of, if you were kind of unsure potentially on your path, committing, I guess, to a 3, 4, 5 year program must have seemed a bit daunting. Having started it now, do you have any regrets around taking that, and any advice to people looking at degree apprenticeships around that commitment?
No regrets at all. I think I was very lucky in coming into a company and a role and a scheme that I kind of clicked with first time. That doesn't happen for everyone. I know plenty of people that have started their apprenticeship schemes, done 3 months, and realised it's not for them. And there is no shame in dropping out. At the end of the day, the company wouldn't want to keep you on if you were disengaged, not offering 100%. So in terms of if I have any regrets to committing to 3 to 5 years, it does seem like a long time initially. But honestly, my first year's gone by in a blink of an eye. So I was quite daunted by the fact that I would be, I was going to say stuck. Stuck's not the right word. I was going to, yeah, I guess. Yeah. Like a 3 to 5 year scheme. It was daunting, because, you know, like I said at the beginning, I'm somebody that does like to jump around a bit, likes a bit of change, likes to challenge myself. So being around for those 3 years seems like I'm cutting that change off as an option. But I reframed it in my head as in 3 years' time, 4 years' time, all of my peers that I went to school with are going to be leaving university. They're going to be leaving with zero experience, zero contacts, or very little contacts, I should say, and 60K in debt. Whereas, I'm going to be coming out, I'm going to have 3 years of experience, 3 years of like experienced contacts, and I'm going to be, net 60 to 70K, depending on, what your salary is. So for me, it was reframing it that got me into that position, because coming out of both of our roles, my apprenticeship and my peers' degree, I'm going to be the one that's further ahead because I'm going to have the degree and the experience. And there's a good chance that, they're going to be coming in at a graduate position, and I'm going to be the one who's going to be, kind of showing them the ropes.
Yeah.
So it almost feels like a bit of a cheat code, a bit of like a slingshot.
Yeah.
So yeah, I say my advice is take the plunge. See if you like it. If you don't, there's no shame in backing out. And yeah, just don't be afraid.
So you dabbled a little bit there on the importance of your network and your personal brand, essentially, and this one might throw you off, as I didn't mention this in kind of our previous chat, but the power of LinkedIn and the power of meeting people and going to these events that you've mentioned, how has that benefited you so far at being at Accolade Wines?
Oh, I can't describe it. Whenever we have issues at work that we don't typically have a contact for already, me and my manager will sit down and scroll through our LinkedIn, and that's probably happened 5 times in the last 8 months in which I've had to dip into my LinkedIn network to get a problem solved. And I think also, not all of the time does a networking contact show its value straight away. I might go into a role in 10 years' time and have connected with someone now that might be a really good contact for me in the future. Or, I speak to a lot of apprentices in kind of lots of different sectors. I've spoken to, bankers, lawyers, other marketers, even, those in like the trade, so builders and electricians and plumbers, and you never know when you're going to need them. I might get myself into some trouble with some money in, 5 years' time and need to speak to a banker, and I know I've got a banking contact. Or, if a tap breaks in my house, I've got a plumbing contact. I don't think they always necessarily show their value in your current role. They can do. They definitely can do. But I think building your personal brand, getting your name out there, connecting with as many people as possible, I don't think there's no harm. You might never speak to that person again, and that's fine. But they might offer you a piece of really valuable help, or an opportunity, or some advice 5, 10, 15 years down the line. So I always try to make as many connections as possible within reason. So keeping them semi-relevant as well.
Amazing. So yeah, great. In terms of being an ambassador then, so how long have you been on the program so far? Is it since the start of your apprenticeship?
Since October, so 7 months.
Yeah, so do you want to tell our audience a bit about what being an ambassador is, what you get to do, what the benefits, what's it enabled you to do also in your full-time job as well?
Yeah, so about 7 months, I think. And the first kind of experience I had with being an ambassador was developing content each month for the Not Going to Uni pages, whether that be a TikTok or an Instagram reel. It can be a blog for the website. It can be an Instagram story takeover, or what's the other one? Like a live Q&A. I think I've probably done most of them in my 7 months. So let me give some examples of ones I've done. I did a blog last month, I think, about what I've learned in 6 months of my apprenticeship. I did a stories takeover in February when I was lucky to be invited to Downing Street to meet with the Secretary of State for Education. Was that a stories takeover, or it might have been a reel? I produced some content then. I did a live Q&A with another ambassador called Jeremy, where we spoke about both of our roles and asked each other questions. That was good fun. So yeah, you're kind of always producing content month to month. And it just kind of gives those that follow the Not Going to Uni page that aren't already apprentices visibility of what an apprenticeship might look like in their chosen sector. The other thing I've done is I've been to a couple of events. I think I did a careers fair with a couple of the Not Going to Uni team. And I also did a photo shoot, I think, a while ago, where me and a couple of ambassadors went along and produced some video and some photo content for Not Going to Uni to use across their campaign. So as an ambassador, you are effectively the face of the Not Going to Uni brand. I think it's really good in terms of development for you. Because it's something which you kind of have to manage on your own. So it's good for your kind of time management and your project management skills. It's great for networking. I know there's an event coming up in which all of us ambassadors are going to meet up. So yeah, it's just a really great opportunity to get your name out there, give everybody who follows the page some visibility of what being an apprentice is like. And also you get to develop yourself while you're there as well. So it's kind of like an all-round great thing. I've got no issues with it.
Has it helped your personal brand?
My what, sorry?
Has it helped your personal brand?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. So just I think I mentioned this. Yeah, I'm sure I can mention it. I do my own podcast about apprenticeships in which I interview other apprentices much like this, but kind of more around kind of break it down into the apprenticeship journey, and each apprentice speaks about a different step. And I've met probably half of mine through Not Going to Uni ambassadorship. I think probably 50% of the guests I've had on. I've also had Connor on as well. That was one of the very early episodes. So yeah, in terms of my personal brand and my podcast brand, and also my kind of reputation within Accolade Wines, I think as well, as somebody who is committed to the apprenticeship scheme. I think me being a Not Going to Uni ambassador has given me opportunities such as developing next year's apprenticeship scheme already, having only been there a year. So kind of taking charge of collecting feedback from the other apprentices and developing the scheme with them, to working with the HR team to, you know, what we can do on the assessment center day, what the interview questions should look like, developing end to end, and then also kind of like exploring options for universities and training providers and stuff like that. So being given that opportunity, you know, 8 months into my apprenticeship was like really valuable to me, and I actually was quite taken aback by it. I was really kind of appreciative of the fact that they'd put that much trust in me this early on, and I genuinely don't think they would have given me that opportunity if they hadn't seen the work I was doing for Not Going to Uni.
Amazing. It's really good to hear that. And I guess to kind of wrap us up for the podcast, a couple of things really is that where do you kind of see your apprenticeship journey going longer term? Have you kind of built a longer term plan, maybe 3-5 years down the line, as to where you want to be, or do you kind of not think that too far ahead yet?
I think I'll be with Accolade for a while. Obviously, I've just finished my first year, so I've got to stay for at least another 2, sorry. And then I'll probably stick around in a full-time position for some amount of time. I won't be there 15 years, but for some couple of years after that. And to be honest,
is there an end goal? Do you have something where you sit here today and go, I'd really love to get to that point, I'd really love to do that role?
Within Accolade, I'd like to progress to, you know, kind of maybe head of digital or something like that at some point further down the line. But looking forward in terms of career-wise, there's so many different ways I could go. You know, I'd love to be a marketing director of a massive company. You know, I think that's everyone in marketing's dream to, you know, work for someone massive like Coke or you know, Lidl or Audi here even, that look like their social media presence is mad. So working there would be incredible. Or, you know, I've dabbled in the idea of potentially moving agency side. So maybe going to get some agency experience, and then long term maybe setting up my own agency. So I've got some ideas, but I don't think I've nailed one down yet. I'm still exploring options.
No, that sounds really exciting. And I guess to end the podcast on a bit of advice for anyone listening, what would you kind of tell your younger self? I mean, you're still young, don't get me wrong. What would you kind of tell yourself, maybe whether it would be going back to applying for apprenticeships when you're leaving school at 16 at level 2, level 3 stage, or maybe leaving sixth form or college at level 4 or level 6 stage? Would there be an advice to our audience listening today around, doesn't have to be just applying for opportunities, but also once you're in the opportunity, how do you apply yourself and essentially make the best version of yourself within that opportunity?
Yeah, I think applying for them, my piece of advice would be, I think I'm going to go back to something I said earlier, which is just be authentic. I spent a lot of time getting very disheartened with rejections until, you know, something clicked in my head and I went, it wasn't necessarily that I wasn't a good option, it's that I wasn't a good fit. And like, reflecting on that, those are all companies that I wouldn't have wanted to work for anyway. There were companies that I dreamt of working for, but going in there, seeing the culture, seeing the ways of working, no, I don't want to do that anymore. You know, big companies. I won't name names in case anybody wants to go there, but for me, that wasn't the right fit. So just be authentic when you go there. That's what they're interested in. Yes, they want to see you've got good skills. They want to see you've got good experience, but just be authentic. And in terms of actually being in the role, I think I'm also going to go back to something I said earlier on, which is at the beginning, within reason, don't say no. Get yourself on at as many opportunities as possible, because that's where the biggest learning takes place. Even if it's, you know, like a work evening dinner out. At the beginning, I was like, oh, they're not going to want me there. I'm like 18. They're all like mid-30s. They're not going to want me there. But actually, that's where like some of the best conversations happen. That's where you start to build those work relationships. That's where you start to build the team's trust. So yeah, just don't say no to anything when you're in there until you've kind of established yourself within the team. Yeah, I think I should also kind of cover that one off by saying don't wear yourself out either, though, because as much as I'm telling you not to say no,
being smart with your time and essentially being a good decision maker in terms of what's going to add value is important, isn't
it? 100%. I spent a lot of time saying yes to everything, and I had to take a week off because of like exhaustion. I had to push myself too far and too hard. So don't say no, but also be smart with your time. Be careful with what you're saying yes to, and look after yourself at the end of the day. The company don't want to see you push yourself to, you know, the point of exhaustion or illness.
Perfect. Well, that ends the podcast, Ethan. So thank you so much for coming on today. Been really great guest, and yeah, have a great day.
Thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to check out each episode on your chosen streaming platform and head over to the Not Going to Uni website to start your future career.